that you want.
What the hell are you doing here, worm boy?
T. Jeff, excuse my partner. He's new and kinda stupid.
As a lot of you already know, a new box just dropped, and with it, a ton of new Gusto support. So I never actually played the Gusto archetype before this box dropped, so I don't know what the deck was like before this, but I say now it's just a super heavy synchro control deck. As far as this deck does meta-wise, it's kind of hard to say. My list personally is kind of mid-tier-ish. It's not exactly a top-tier deck, but it's also not exactly the worst deck in the game. It's just kind of something you can mess around with when you feel like having some fun. But as far as the archetype goes in general, it's really hard to say because there's so many different ways of building this deck, and there might be just one really solid competitive list out there. It's kind of hard to say, especially when there's only 5 extra deck slots, because there's so many Gusto monsters you can choose from and other synchro monsters you can put in to support it. But without further ado, let's get into my list. So the skill I chose to run with this deck is level Augmentation. Reveal one monster in your hand and select one monster on the other side of the field. The selected monster's level increases by the level of the monster you revealed. This skill can only be used once per duel. So this skill for me was kind of a no-brainer for the list I made, simply because this deck list has 5 different extra deck monsters, all different levels, and because you have so many low-level tuners, you can easily swap between the levels and get out which synchro monster you need for which situation. It can also be a useful skill for kind of level fixing when you don't actually have the level required to synchro summon. This one can just make sure you have it. This deck runs 5 synchro monsters. Mistbird Clausolas is a level 3 synchro monster with 0 attack and 2300 defense. It requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters and has the effect, once per turn you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes 0, and if it does, its effects are negated. These changes last until the end of the turn. So honestly, you're not going to get to use this card very often, but when you do get to use it, it does have its uses. Like if you're against an opponent that has very little life points, or a monster that has way too much attack for you to deal with, making their attack 0 can be a very relevant effect. Also, negating a monster's effect can be very useful, especially against something like a Silent Swordsman or Silent Magician. They just have cards that stop you using your spells altogether, since this deck really relies on its spells. Daigusto Falcos is a synchro monster that requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. It has the effect, when this card is synchro summoned, all Gusto monsters currently on the field gain 600 attack. So honestly, of all your synchro monsters, this one is by far the worst. It doesn't really synergize that well with the deck, as giving your other Gusto monsters 600 attack is a pretty irrelevant effect since their attack is already so low that if you buff it by 600, it's still not even going to clear one of your basic Destiny Hero monsters, for example. And giving 600 attack to one of your other Gusto synchros is also pretty unlikely since you don't often have multiple Gusto synchros out on the board. Basically, it's only here to fill that level 4 slot since there is going to be a lot of times where you can get a level 4 synchro out that you may just need to. Daigusto Gulldos is a level 5 synchro monster that requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Gusto monsters. Once per turn, you can shuffle 2 Gusto monsters from your graveyard into the main deck to target one face-up monster your opponent controls and destroy that target. So from going from worst to best, this one is probably the best of your synchro monsters as it simply just has a really nice effect. Being able to destroy a monster is just a useful effect in general, and this card is really easy for your deck to summon. Plus, it's generally really easy for you to get Gusto monsters into your graveyard, especially considering the material used to synchroing this card is generally going to be Gusto monsters. HTS Psyhemuth is a level 6 synchro monster that requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. After damage calculation, when this card battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that monster, also banish this card. So this card is also required for the deck in a similar way that level 4 is. It's not necessarily a very good card, but it's just a card that's required because you need a level 6 synchro, because there's going to be a ton of times where you can summon one and it's going to be your only option. This card can also fill the very specific niche in the deck of being able to deal non-target removal. Since its effect isn't targeted, you can kill things like Obelisk, whereas most of your synchro removal or your spell removal is unable to deal with it. Mistworm is a level 9 synchro monster that requires 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. If this card is synchro summoned, target up to 3 cards your opponent controls, return those cards to the hand. So honestly, this card probably isn't very good, it's just really fun to use. You get to summon a giant worm for fuck's sake. It does have some very specific niches in that its removal is returning cards to hand, so that it can make sure your opponent, if they can't be destroyed or can't be banished, can still technically be removed. Keep in mind that when using this guy's effect on a synchro monster or a fusion monster, it will just send it back to the extra deck, since they can't be sent back to the hand. Alright, now we'll move on to the Gusto monsters. So this deck runs 4 Gusto monsters. Daigusto Gulldos is a level 3 tuner monster with the effect, when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 2 or lower Daigusto monster from your deck. So you notice when I go through a lot of these Daigusto cards that a lot of their effects are going to be very similar, in that when they're destroyed, they go to the graveyard and they summon another monster in its place. This is just simply how the deck works, because this deck loves to have Daigusto cards in the graveyard as a lot of your card effects require Daigustos in your graveyard, and also it loves to be able to synchro summon monsters, so if you have this card on the board, your opponent kills it, you get another card out, that means you'll have a monster on the board still for synchro material during your turn. Daigusto Egul is a level 1 tuner monster with the effect, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower non-tuner Daigusto monster from your deck. So this card's effect is very similar to Gulldo and provides a very similar function. The only main difference is that this card requires it to be destroyed by battle for its effect to activate, whereas Gulldo can just be destroyed by anything. Winda, Priestess of Daigusto is a level 2 psychic monster with the effect, when this card is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one Daigusto tuner monster from your deck. Again, very similar effect to the previous Daigustos, just different variants in which cards you can choose to summon. In this case, it's just going to be able to summon the 2 tuner monsters I just went through. So for the last 3 monsters I went through, it's kind of hard for me to explain exactly which monsters you want to summon from your deck and at what times. It's kind of going to be a bit of trial and error for you. The only real tip I have for you is that to make sure you plan ahead. So when your opponent first starts killing your monsters, make sure you have an end game in sight. So when they kill your first one, and you summon the next one, if you count how many attacks your opponent has left, try to make it so that you end up with the Daigusto on the board that you want for your next turn. The last Daigusto monster in the deck is Pilica. What this card does is when this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one Wurn tuner monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in face up defense position. Its effects are negated. If you activate this effect, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except wind monsters. You can only use the effect of Pilica once per turn. So obviously this card provides a very easy way to synchro summon, as you just summon it, get one of your Daigustos out of your graveyard, and there's your synchro material to synchro summon. This card also has some added synergy with Egul, in that when Egul is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can then summon Pilica to the board, and when that's summoned, it activates its effect, and you can summon Egul back. The rest of the deck is just a spell and trap cards. Contact with Daigusto allows you to target 2 Daigusto monsters in your graveyard and 1 card your opponent controls. Shuffle both targets in your graveyard into the deck, then destroy the opponent's target. So this is one of the reasons why you want to get as many Daigusto monsters in the graveyard as possible. Keep in mind generally you can use this card after you've synchro summoned, as most of the materials you use are Daigusto. Psychokinesis is a spell card with the effect, if you control a psychic monster, target 1 card on the field, destroy it, and if you do, take 1000 damage. So as you notice with this deck, most of the cards in it are psychics, a few of them are only winged beasts, but most of the humanoid kind of characters and majority of your synchros will be psychic monsters. The last card on the deck is Paleozoic Canadia. I don't really think I have to go through this card as it's mega popular right now, but basically keep in mind that when you do special summon one of itself to the board, it can be used as part of your synchro summoning. Alright guys, that's basically it for the talking part of this video. The rest of this video will just be 5 gameplays showing this deck in action. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here, comment if you got any questions or feedback. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Also join my Discord.
Duel. Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.